Welcome back to the Time for Heroes podcast. This week's guest is comedian Nick Helm. Nick Helm is a regular on 8 out of 10 Characters Countdown. We spoke about that, as well as his early life growing up, how he got into comedy, his free series sitcom Uncle, and his other BBC series Heavy Entertainment. And towards the end we spoke about training a conservative baroness to become a stand-up comedian, how Nick dealt with that. Also at the end, Nick picked his 4 heroes to come for dinner. So I hope you enjoy the podcast, and there'll be one coming around very soon. Thanks. If you tell me about your early life growing up, where you grew up, what school was like, things like that, and how you kind of initially came to be where in the profession that you're in.
Well, so I was born in London. I was born at St Bartholomew's Hospital in London, which I think is within the Bow Bells, which means that I'm technically a Cockney.
Right.
And I live in North London now, and from my roof you can see, well, in actual fact, just if you leave the front of my building, there's the cinema that my mum used to take me to when I was little. So I live really close to that. So I kind of like moved away from London when I was about 7 or 8 to St Albans, and went to junior school and secondary school in St Albans, sixth form, and all my life I felt like I wanted to move back to London, and I moved back to I've lived all sort of around London. I lived North London and South London and here and there, and then I eventually moved back to kind of like not my neighborhood, but like near to walking distance to where I lived, where I grew up in Finsbury Park. And yeah, so I sort of like came back. I'd never really felt like I was at home anywhere. There's sort of like that nagging, you get like a nagging doubt.
Yeah.
You live in somewhere and you're never really completely settled. And then when I moved back to North London, it sort of everything sort of made a bit more sense to me.
Right. So what was school like for you back then? Was that an enjoyable experience?
I really liked school when I really loved school when I was in London. So up until I remember there was there was like a big gang of us kids that were growing up near Finsbury Park, and we were little, and I just remember that we were all good friends. And then when I moved, I suddenly realized that, well, I was suddenly like an outsider, and I'd never been that before.
Right.
And I don't think I really ever fit in to St Albans. St Albans was sort of like a different, it was like a change of pace,
Yeah.
London in the 80s. I mean, I think one of the reasons we moved was because there was a lot of violence around where we lived. It was a fairly rough area. I mean, it's pretty rough now, but I think back at the time it was really rough, and there's a lot of prostitution around where we were. And I remember it was the mid 80s, so it was like height of the AIDS epidemic. And I remember we used to have school assemblies because we'd have a lot of kind of drug addicts that would shoot up either in the playground or by the playground, and they'd leave their needles, and we'd pick them up and play with them. And so we used to have assemblies about not picking up needles and stuff. And I think also my parents worked in central London, and so it took ages for them to sort of like travel from one side of London to the other, and it was actually quicker for them to travel from outside of London into London.
Right.
So there's like a load of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So we ended up moving to St Albans. Like London was very sort of like multicultural and, you know, diverse. Everyone's talking about diversity now, but like London was, you know, really kind of a huge mix of different kind of nationalities and ethnicities, and that's where I sort of grew up until about 7. So when I moved to St Albans, which was predominantly white and middle class, it was a bit of a culture shock. And I went from somewhere where everyone was very different to somewhere where everyone was very similar. They were all very skinny white boys that played football in at break time, and I was sort of, I was sort of overweight, which I wasn't in London, but we moved on over a weekend. So on the Friday, I was just one of the kids, and then on the Monday, I was the fat kid. And I was like, wow, you know, like, so a lot changed in a very short amount of time. And it's sort of, I never really kind of got over that shock to the system.
Did that have negative impacts in? Like, did you feel as if you were bullied or anything, or just?
Yeah, but it was verbal stuff.
Yeah.
And I had people follow me home and stuff like that, which was kind of, but like, it was just like a real shock, because in some ways it was kind of like there wasn't drugs and prostitution, so in some ways it was a step up, but in other ways it was kind of difficult to sort of fit in, and so like for a negative point of view, I guess it took me a while to sort of make friends. I mean, I came to St Albans just at the end of like one school process, so maybe it was like the last term of junior school, and then we moved into, or maybe it was top infants, and then we moved over to junior school, and then I had kind of like whatever that was, and then by the time I got to secondary school, I mean, I really just never really fit in. I wasn't like a complete loner. I was a bit of a loner, but I did have, you know, friends and people that stuck up for me and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm still friends with, you know, I'm still friends with my friend Rebecca, who's like my oldest friend, and we met in like primary school, infant school. We've known each other for 33 years now. Right. So it's kind of like, so there was lots of good stuff that happened. You know, I always feel bad because for my parents, because I've never sort of like let it go that I hated moving. But I do think that if I'd have stayed in London, it could have gotten a lot worse. And then I didn't really kind of like make like proper friends until maybe year 10 or 11, when I started doing drama.
Right.
And I think as a result of that, I sort of retreated into myself a lot. I wasn't into football. It wasn't a thing. It was, you know, my dad watches like tournaments and World Cup and stuff like that. And my whole family do, but they don't have a team, and I didn't have a team, and it wasn't something I was drawn to or particularly interested in. So I sort of retreated into myself, and I had quite a big imagination, and I'd sort of you know, make up stories, and then later on I'd write stories, and you know, I would sort of like make believe a lot of stuff. So kind of, I guess what I lacked in sort of a social life, I kind of made up for in my imagination. Yeah. And so
you find a lot of that.
When I found
you find a lot of that with people kind of, you're either kind of social, or you're kind of happy within yourself, and kind of you can please yourself with your imagination. So so that's the type of person you were.
Well, I think I was very lonely as well, but I got to a point where I didn't really need other people.
Yeah.
And I sort of had given up on that. Like I found secondary school awful. I hated it a lot. And then I would miss a lot of school because I wasn't well. and then I got sort of diagnosed with ME,
Right.
and but I still can't work out whether I actually had ME or whether I was sort of diagnosed with it as kind of like an easy sort of solution,
Mm-hmm.
or at least we got a name for it. And then because of that, it was sort of like a vicious cycle, a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if I was ill, I ended up taking a lot of time off. And then when I went back to school, everyone would sort of like treat me like an outsider because I hadn't been at school. And, it's sort of, and then that made me not want to be at school.
Mm-hmm.
So
I can mind that as well, being, because you're the same age as me, aren't you? You're 40.
Yeah.
I can mind Grange Hill having a storyline about one of the characters of the ME. So that would have been right about the time we were growing up. So it was probably like a big deal then, and that's maybe a lot to do with your diagnosis.
You don't hear a lot about it anymore, and it's also it feels. I don't really remember secondary school that much because up until a point, because I really hated it, and I didn't really feel like I fit in. But then when I started doing art and drama and English, I was always really good at English.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was actually good at stuff, I really enjoyed it. And then when I did art and drama, that's sort of like drama certainly sort of a social thing. So I met a lot of people, and it was that really changed everything, because they were all the very, when you're at school, it was weird. Everyone stuck within their year group. So, at break time, at lunch, it would be, you'd be stuck with your year group, except for if you were into art and drama and music, because everyone hung around the art and music block. Right. And it would be all different years. And it seemed like they were all of the people that were sort of a bit of the outsiders of their years. But to me, they were older kids and they all looked really cool. Mm-hmm. And and whereas my year group used to go to like house parties at the weekend, the kids from the art and music department would go to the pub, and so I started hanging around with them. And then I was told that I was like one of the losers, and when I started hanging around with the art and music and drama kids, then we were all doing like really grown up things, and we weren't losers at all. And it was just really interesting, because you kind of like go, there's one group, the group of all the cool kids were being dropped off around each other's houses by their mums on a Friday night, and we'd be walking into town and hanging out with each other. And I was friends with like I was like 14, 15, and I was hanging out with 17, 18-year-olds, and we were just all into like the same stuff.
Yeah, it's funny then, isn't it, how your world kind of turns, and it's kind of like that kind of moment that you realise how fucked up everything is, isn't it?
It was like this big secret that we'd sort of like walked into, because if you weren't at school, I mean, we had a really good drama department and art department and all that, but at school, really, if you weren't into sport and you weren't into PE, there was no real way for you to kind of like excel at something. And so then when I started doing kind of drama and plays and stuff, I got like small parts in plays all the way through school. And then I didn't do it for a few years because I was terrible at learning lines, and I like lost my nerve for it. And then I started getting, big parts and then leads in school plays.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just, it was sort of like the arty farty equivalent of being good at football. And then all of a sudden, you're kind of like succeeding and excelling at something in kind of like this public arena. Mm-hmm. And people kind of like, teachers are nicer to you, and people are going, oh, you're good at something, and you're kind of like going, and you're discovering that you're good at something, and it's something that you really enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And
it must be like it must be absolutely amazing for your confidence in things like that, and kind of realizing that you're good
I
at
think
stuff.
I think so. I mean, like, but because I was into all these things. I mean, I was in I formed a band, and I would write. I look back on it now, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I wrote something like 160 songs in like a year or a 2-year period. That if I was that prolific now, do you know what I mean? It was like I used to just write a song a day, and I wasn't even studying music at school, and then I was in like all the school plays, and I was writing theatre, and I was good at English, and I was it was all the creative stuff. If it was anything to do with science or maths or learning a language, I was absolutely atrocious, totally shit at all of that stuff, and it was just the creative stuff. Like I've got kind of like an encyclopedic capacity to learn stuff about films. Right. So if I hear something about a film, it will go in my head. And I always think that if I had that capacity for like biology or chemistry, I would have been like an amazing scientist.
Or you'd be helping out some amount in this pandemic. You'd be a bloody millionaire.
Absolutely, I'd be a millionaire. But I just didn't. I wasn't naturally drawn to any of that. So I was only interested in all this stuff. But that's kind of like I found. I made friends. I found my confidence, and it really sort of like saved me. I had an amazing drama teacher called Louise Wallace, Louise Howes, Miss Howes, but she got married, so she's called Louise Wallace.
Right.
And she decided when we were in, so it would have been 2017. So when we were 16, so year 11, upper sixth form. When I was upper sixth form, no, upper year 11, before sixth form. So she kind of like convinced the head teacher to let her take, the way it worked, the way school plays worked was you'd audition in September, you'd rehearse up until Christmas, and then in January, a school play would be put on. In 1996 to 1997, we did Romeo and Juliet, and I was the prince in Romeo and Juliet.
Right.
And my teacher, drama teacher, decided, I think it was one of her dreams to take a production up to the Edinburgh Festival. And she must have been about 25 at the time. And so she convinced the head teacher as like a extracurricular thing to take up a bunch of kids to the Edinburgh Festival. And it was sort of like everyone from about 12 to 18. And so she abridged it so it was like an hour and a half. It went from 2 hours to an hour and a half. And we all adapted it and trained. And then for that summer, the summer of 1997, we all rehearsed a abridged production of Shakespeare, and we took it up to the Edinburgh Festival. I think we did a week. We took it up to the Edinburgh Festival. So we rehearsed. We had kind of like, we were at venue 45, which was St. Paul's Kirk and St. Paul's Church, which is just near the main train station in Edinburgh.
Waverley.
Waverley, yeah.
Yeah.
So when you come out, there's sort of like a church door that's just under the bridge on the other side of and then there's kind of like a stairway that goes up all the way up to the Royal Mile, next to it. And we used to just run up and down those stairs, and it was great because before we went up there, we had like in the school hall, we had the venue taped out on the school floor. So we knew what the size of the venue was. We had all of like the props and the set and the costume and everything. We just rehearsed it every day. and took it up, and then we flyed. I think the show was on about midday, so we'd go up in these mini buses, and a bunch of the teachers gave up their holiday, a load of the students did, and we went up and we flyed every day. We had to get our own audience in, and we'd get, because it was Shakespeare, it was quite an easy sell. So we'd always have like good audiences, and then at about 2:00, when we'd finished with the play, it was our time, so we'd go back to the accommodation, we'd all get changed, and then because we were naughty kids, we'd go out and get hammered and go and see stand-up comedy up in Edinburgh. So when I was 16, at the Tron, I remember I saw Jason John Whitehead at the Tron, saw Al Murray at the Pleasance. He got me out of the audience and got me up on stage. And I know that when I get people out of the audience, people say, "Oh, don't pick on me," and I always think it's not picking on people. I feel like you're actually asking them to participate. And I remember when I was young, full of confidence, Al Murray, got me out of the audience on stage, and it made my day. Do you know what?
Yeah,
people would be cheering me, and do you know what I mean?
I would be the same. I would enjoy that. I would enjoy that.
I loved it. Now I don't want that. I completely understand. But at the time, I loved it, and I'm pretty sure that had like a huge impact on me. And then when I did like my first full hour in 2010, I did it at the Tron, because that's where I first went to see stand-up comedy, at the Tron.
So going back then, do you think going to see that first stand-up in Edinburgh, is that kind of then was that then the decision that you wanted to be a comedian yourself?
No, it was a decision that and I didn't know I wanted to be a comedian until I did my first gig.
Right.
I knew I was a huge Jack D fan, and I'd get like Jack D videos for every birthday, and I like Lee Evans as well, but not as much as Jack D. My sister was into Eddie Izzard. As a family, we grew up on like French and Saunders, and Not the 9 O'Clock News, and Blackadder, and all that stuff. But it was really like the Mary Whitehouse experience when I was probably about 10 or 11, and Fist of Fun when I was a little bit older. And then we used to watch Roseanne on a Friday night. I got into Red Dwarf. It was just like early 90s when there's a moment where you've adopted your parents, and I've got an older sister, so you adopt their tastes up until a certain point, and then you discover what you like. And like when I was 10 or 11, and I could, went to the video shop every week, and I'd rent out Steve Martin films and Spaceballs, and it would always be comedies, because I found horror films terrifying.
Yeah.
So I would always kind of like go for comedies and stuff. But comedy was always something that other people did. You look at it and you go, that is an impossible thing to do. I don't know how you get your head around comedy. I don't know how you'd even begin. I never even thought of it as not even like as an option, because if you think of it like an option, it's almost like you go, how about be a comedian? No, not for me. It never even occurred to me that it was like a thing that you could do. Like, it was furthest from my mind. I was interested in films, filmmaking, theatre. I saw kind of like, I saw theatre as a way to sort of like get used to writing dialogue, so that I could start writing films. But comedy was kind of like magic, and I don't know how they do it. So I just enjoyed it. But I would say when I did that first Edinburgh in 1997, that was a moment where it was weird, because there was only a small handful of us kids that went up there. And when we came back to the sixth form the next year, we were different. We'd had this experience, which I guess is the equivalent of I know that the music department used to go off, and they used to go to kind of like places in Europe to kind of like play in an orchestra. Mm-hmm. And I know that the PE team, the football team used to tour around other schools and go places. The art department used to go to kind of places, but for drama, it was kind of like it was just us that went. And then when we came back, it was like cool, where I was just like, I don't know what it is, and I don't know how to do it, but I know that I want to go up to Edinburgh every year for the rest of my life. Yeah. I don't need to be famous. I don't need to be a millionaire. But if I can go up to Edinburgh every year, then I'll be. I think this is what I want to do with my life. And I did 97. We did another play in 98. And I did my final play in 99. Mm-hmm. And then I went to university in 99. And then I didn't do Edinburgh in 2000. And I missed it. And then the opportunity came along in 2001. Because I think that I was in contact with my old school. And I think that they were taking up Midsummer Night's Dream, and they had a deal with the venue where if they did Midsummer Night's Dream at midday, they got a reduced price for a midnight slot.
Right.
And they said, do I want to fill the midnights? Oh, yeah, because I'd done my A-levels by that point. So I was very confident in the sixth form. And I wrote, we all had to do an individual skill in drama. So my A-levels were English, art and drama. And I did technology in GCSE, and I did really well in tech, and I like woodwork, and I like, so it's not all just flouncy stuff. I can kind of like, I can make a tie rack. And I got like 100. I got like an A star for the tie rack that I made, and my dad still uses it, so it's kind of like great. But when I went over to doing all the drama stuff, I was just incredibly confident. And when we did A-levels, we had an individual skill, so it could be like set design, or script writing, or acting. Anything to do with lighting, direction, anything to do with acting. I think we had to pick 3 disciplines, and I think mine were directing, set design, maybe acting, but I think that would be a bit arrogant. Maybe it would be writing. And I wrote a 10-minute monologue that I did that had like a couple of people that were acting out scenes behind me. And I was like the first, I did really well. I got, it's difficult to sort of like talk about successes and achievements without feeling like an absolute twat. But I was the first student in my school to get 100% for drama. Mm-hmm. But then the next year they were giving them out, and I was like, right. But I was the first one. And then so I had like this 10-minute play, and my drama teacher, not the same one, a different one, said, why don't you take that up to Edinburgh? And I was like, how do you take a 10-minute monologue up to Edinburgh? So in 2001, when they said, do you want to take up a play? I said, yeah, I've got this 10 minutes. And if I write another 5-10 minutes of different things, I'll put them together and it'll be a collection, because the monologue was perfect. So I didn't want to touch that. So I'll just write, easy as fuck, mate. I'll just write another 500% 10-minute, like, they weren't sketches, they were like mini plays, but like, or like one scene plays. So I just wrote, my friend that I was at school with, we went to the same university, and we sort of like got our heads together and we wrote some plays, some scenes and some sketches. They weren't sketches, but they were kind of, and we came up with like 6 dark comedy mini plays that we strapped together. We called it Air Freshener, because relationships stink, and it was all about relationships. We were 20, so we were kind of like, this is 20 years ago, which is kind of like mind-boggling to me. But 20 years ago, I took up I directed it. I was in it. We wrote it. There was 4 of us in it, and we went up to Edinburgh. It was on at midnight, so about 11 o'clock we would fly for an hour, and then we'd do our show. On the first day, we had the Scotsman came in, and I think we only did a week, and we knew that the Scotsman liked it, but they hadn't printed the review. So we went a whole week, and we were flying all day, and we didn't get any audiences in, and the review didn't come out. And then I think we'd sleep all day, we'd fly for like 6 hours, we'd do the show, then we'd go out and we'd drink all night, and then we'd sleep in the day, and then we'd fly and do it. It was like a cycle, and then it was quite a good routine. And we used to get really nervous, so it was kind of like we'd sort of distract ourselves. And the best moment was coming off stage, because it was the longest before you had to get back on stage. And I know the reason I started writing was because I was so bad at auditions, and I was so bad at learning lines, that I was like, if I write for myself, then I can cast myself, and I can, I'll be a writer performer. And so, we'd get nervous all day, we'd do it. And then on the last day, the review came out, and we got 4 stars in the Scotsman. And I don't think we sold out, but we had a very full audience.
Right.
And the show went incredible. And it was like a fairy tale. It was sort of like, we went up, I'm sort of like painting this picture. St Albans was kind of like, it was kind of like posh and middle class, but the school wasn't incredibly posh, and it kind of, it was like a real big kind of like gamble for that teacher to take us all up there.
Yeah.
And then when I had the opportunity to do it, I sort of like was like, yeah, I can do this. So we did, and I didn't know that I couldn't do it. Mm-hmm. So I think ignorance is kind of, and being naive is kind of a blessing at that age.
Yeah, just throwing yourself into something and watching how it all works out. Again, that would again have such an impact on your confidence again.
Yeah, it was really kind of, it was just sort of like, it was magical, because I'd done plays. This was something that I'd written, and this was something that I was in, and I was getting kind of like acknowledgement for, not a load of acknowledgement, but enough to keep me going. And it kind of like was like, oh, I can do this. And it was just sort of like this. We, all 4 of us, kind of like fell asleep on the plane home. There was three guys and a girl, and we just sort of like, it was just like this absolutely magical experience where on the way back we'd sort of like we'd worked really hard on it, and no one had do you know what I mean? It was sort of like we'd done it. We'd done a year at uni, or 2 years at uni by that point. No, a year at uni. And we could have, it's 2001. So we'd done 2 years at uni. So we could have kind of like had a holiday. Yeah. And we didn't. And we did this thing. And then it was just like, okay, that's what you do every year. You just take a show up to Edinburgh. So then we did another one the year after, which was a follow-up called Christmas Tree. And the thinking behind that was we did the whole month that year. And we did 3 weeks of the new show, Christmas Tree, and then 1 week of Air Freshener because it had gone so well the year before. And it was a very different experience. And that was when I had graduated. So I'd finished university in 2002. And I'd done well at university. I hadn't read any books at uni. And I to this day, if you're young and listening and going to university, you don't get that opportunity really again to have, you get paid to read, and it's kind of like just, I didn't read any books when I was in, and I fluked it, and I did well, and I felt kind of like, well, I haven't really earned it. And then when I left university, I had this degree. I did drama and television at uni, but it was really, we made documentaries and we did workshops with kids, and lots of things. I still hadn't thought about stand-up. There was one module where we did Commedia dell'arte, where which is what One Man, Two Governors is based on. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like an Italian form of comedy where like all of like the staple characters and plots of comedy come from. And I did really well on that course, and you had to perform in that, and I made people laugh, and I knew that was really addictive, but I still hadn't done any stand-up. And I left university, and then I had like a complete confidence crash because I got a first, but it was sort of like a first from Winchester, so it wasn't kind of like a very well respected university at the time. I don't know what it is now, but at the time, so, and also it was in this thing which was drama, television, and theatre, which was kind of like a nothingy course. It wasn't drama, it wasn't an acting course, it wasn't a practical course.
Yes,
it was a lot of like writing and
everything lumped in together.
Yeah, it was, and I remember on the first day of the course, we went in and there was like 200 students, and on the second, and they told us what the course was going to be, and on the second day of the course, there was like 30 students, and everyone had left, and I felt so bad for the lecturers that I thought, oh, well, I'll stick with it then, because even though I'm paying for it, it was just sort of like I felt like I owed these lecturers that I'd just met the day before to stick with the course, and so I did. I stuck with it for 3 years, but it was kind of like it didn't open any doors for me, and then I had a massive confidence crash, and I think I was at my most confident then when I was 19, 20, 21, and then everything after that has kind of like been a bit of a downward spiral.
So,
but that takes me to.
That takes you to when?
Well, that takes me to the end of uni, and I've written a couple of shows.
Right. So, when did you start kind of bringing music into your act?
So that would have been in Christmas Tree, the second show. I worked in a pub, and to this day, bar work is pretty much my favourite job that I've ever had. Mm-hmm. It was good. I'd lost a lot of confidence, but I did bar work to get me through university, and also I would take all of my savings from bar work and I'd put that into Edinburgh, and I would write songs. So I was in a band, and I'd write songs at uni, and I wrote loads of songs at uni. I was in a band at school, not at uni, but I would write songs at uni. Mm-hmm. My housemate was into music as well, and would sort of like learn how to play guitar. He learned a lot more than me, but I learned about 5 chords, and then I never really learned any more. And all of my songs are based around about 4 or 5 chords.
I bet like me.
I mean, it's sort of like it worked, and then at no point did I kind of like. I just ended up just being busy, and it was sort of like, and I, it's the dream is to, like Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, and then they can't play guitar, and then at the end they go somewhere else and they learn how to play guitar, and then because of time travel, it's instantaneous. They can play guitar. It's like that, or The Matrix, any Keanu Reeves film, basically. It would be amazing to just be able to learn how to play guitar without putting the time and effort in. But I could play guitar enough to write stuff on, and I'd write songs that you. And I had one funny song, which was called "Touch Myself Ain't Half as Good as You."
Right.
And when I worked in the pub, they would get me to play it after hours. So, at closing time, there'd be a lock-in or something, and I would play this song, and they all really loved the song. And again, I wasn't sort of like showboating. There was like big personalities in the pub, and they'd sort of like say, "Nick, play the song," and I'd kind of like be dragged out from behind the bar, and I'd play the song, and they'd, "Oh yeah," and they'd all like the song, and I'd be like, "Yeah," but it wasn't kind of like, there's a difference between like arrogance and confidence. I was confident I could make eye contact with people, and I was really, convinced that I could do something, and I could do it. It wasn't like I thought I could do something and I was actually shit at it. And I was doing a thing, and I was getting good reviews, and audiences liked it, and I was like proud and confident with it. But and so when we went to the Christmas Tree, I wrote like this musical segment around it, where we took that song and we like acted it out, and then that was the point where it's just like, right, I think later on I read the Steve Martin book, Born Standing Up. And one of the things that rang true with that was Steve Martin said that just take everything that you can do and put it in one act.
Right.
And before I'd read that book, I was kind of like, I was writing poetry as well. So when I had to do a show, it would be kind of like, I'll do like a monologue, and I'll do something funny, and I'll do a song, and maybe I'll do a poem, and I'd sort of like scrape together even artwork. I'd build sort of like set and props, and we'd make stuff in my garden, and it was all like creative. Did everything, designed the posters, which was shit, but I designed them. Do you know what I mean? And so it's just kind of like, so you do a bit of everything, and you take everything that you do, and you'd only show people the stuff you could do. You wouldn't show people the stuff that you couldn't do, that you weren't very good at. And so people would leave thinking, wow, this guy can do everything. And you go, I can do 5 things, but you saw them all. But you now think, because I did 5 things, I can do 1,000 things. And when later on, when Steve Martin says, just do everything that you're good at in one thing, I was like, yes, I've been doing that. And that's right. And then didn't do anything in 2002. I was doing theatre in education, which was I wrote a school friend had gone on to work for a county council somewhere.
Right.
They needed a play to go around schools about driving, to go around and tell 16-year-old boys not to drive their car fast.
Right.
And they said, Nick, we write it. And so I got a job, I got a job writing this theatre and education play. So I wrote it, and then I directed it, and then I organised the tour, and I don't think I was in it at first. I think I hired other people, but then, I was trying to make as much money as possible. So I put myself in it, and I acted in it so I could pay myself as an actor as well. And I did it for about two or 3 years, where we were going around schools, and it was literally, you'd go into like a posh boys' school, and there'd be like, I don't know, 1,000 16-year-old boys, and I was maybe 22 or 23, so the age difference wasn't that huge.
No.
but you're on the wrong side of authority. You know, you're not one of them. You're a teacher. I'm the same age as the teachers that we had once they'd finished university and they went in. And so I was going into schools with like this group of actors. We were teaching 16-year-old boys not to drive their car fast, and it was good money, but it was absolutely soul destroying, and I hated it. I was doing it, but it made me very unhappy, and the kids hated us, and I was just like, fucking hell, I don't want to do it. I did, and I took the money from that and I funneled it into taking a show up in 2004, which was called Love Life. I did Edinburgh then, and that went fine. That was a two-hander, which was like it was like a funny PowerPoint show where we're doing a presentation about friendship and love and life, but I've had a nervous breakdown and my friend hates me, and it was about two childhood friends that were, you know, the world's leading child self-help gurus. But now they've grown up, and it's about how fucked up they are now that they're grown up. So we did that in 2004, and that was absolutely fine. And I sort of like was running my own theatre company, and then I moved down to Brighton because one of my friends from university who did the same course as me was down there. He'd been in Japan for a few years and he'd got back, and we decided to go into business together. And I'd already been doing theatre and education. So we were like, I'll take this theatre and education business and we'll make loads of money by doing theatre and education, and I'll take all of the profits and I'll put them into doing shows in Edinburgh. So for the year I can make money doing theatre and education, and I'll just funnel it all back into doing kind of like stuff up in Edinburgh. But I hated doing it, and then I lost the contract, and the guy I was working with kind of didn't bring as much to the table as I was hoping,
right?
Which is polite. And then everything went tits up, and I ended up I lived in Brighton for a year, which I hated, and then I ended up back at home with my mum and dad. Yeah, back at so I was 25 or 26 by that point, and I was back there, and I was just like, I don't know what I want to do. I know I don't want to do theatre and education. I literally don't know what to do. I was 25 because it was 2006, and hadn't done Edinburgh in 2005, and then when I was in the upper sixth form, I'd started writing a play, and it was dragging on and on. It was going on for however long, 9 years. And so by the time it got to so 97, I started writing a play, and by the time it got to 2006, I still hadn't done it. So I booked it into Edinburgh, and I was like, I'm doing this play in Edinburgh. I've got to write it. I've got to do it. I'll do it in Edinburgh. And I was just sort of like, I was back at home. I'd sort of like lost all my confidence. I couldn't make eye contact with anyone. I had very bad skin. I was very stressed. My business had gone tits up. I was like this golden child in the sixth form and at university, where I was like an overachiever, you know. And then I was coming to terms with the fact that I couldn't really make it in the real world, and that I didn't know what to do. My dad was pressuring me into doing an IT course, and I was just like, I absolutely do not want to do that. And you know, you hear stories from like actors, people that have made it. Ray Winstone, you know, and he'll say something like, you know, if you have a B, you know, plan B, then that's what you'll end up doing.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have a plan B. It was just like, okay, I don't know what, but I didn't know what to do. So I wrote a list. I think at the beginning of the year, I wrote a list on a piece of paper, and it was sort of like a no holds barred what do you want to do for a job? So I, be an astronaut. So I wrote that down. Be a cowboy. I wrote that down. Write a book. Wrote that down. Be in a band. Wrote that down. So and I just wrote down everything that I wanted to do, right, with my life. Mm-hmm. And then I'd go, right, well, I'm not going to be a cowboy. I don't like horses that much. So I cross that out. I'm not going to be an astronaut. At 25, I'm too old to go back and learn maths and science and all that stuff. So I'll never be an astronaut. Fine. And then it got to stuff like write a book. I'll be like, that's great, but I'm depressed right now. And I need to get something. I need to do something today to get me out of what I'm doing. And I can write a book, but that'll take time. Mm-hmm. But put a circle around that, because it just needs me. Being a band, I've got to orchestrate other people, I've got to convince other people to play my music or to do whatever. And I've just done a load of theatre, and I don't want to organise other people anymore. So that's off, right? I just, And then one of the things was be a stand-up comedian. And I was just like, I never thought about that. So I did. So I literally I think I was working in a pub, which I couldn't make eye contact with people, and I would sort of like look down and I'd take people's orders, but I was very sort of like it was like within the 4 years. What did you say?
Timid. You're kind of like
timid, yeah.
Broken.
Yeah, I was sort of like, I was ashamed, and I felt like my best years were behind me, and I was like, I've fucked it. I've absolutely fucked my life. Everyone that I knew that hadn't gone into like the arts were getting jobs. People were like managers that I went to school with. I remember I worked in a pub in St Albans, and people that I went to school with would come into the pub and they'd see me in the pub, and they'd feel bad for me, and I'd be like, well, I'm happy working in the pub and I don't need your pity, but also I felt like people were looking at me like going, what happened? Do you know what I mean? Like, you were meant to leave. I'm what you call it, projecting, but people couldn't make eye contact. I couldn't make eye contact with them. People couldn't make eye contact with me. It was a whole thing where no one, maybe they weren't even looking at me. So yeah, I felt really shit about this thing. And so I scraped together all the money that I'd made from the pub, and I enlisted in a 200 quid course, 1 day course to do stand up. And I was like, there were ones that cost like 1,000 quid. I think Amused Moose was like multiple weeks and you could do that. But I didn't have that much money, and I didn't have that much time, and I didn't know if I wanted to even do stand up. And I just thought 200 quid, it's 1 day, and I think I'll know at the end of that day whether I want to do it or not. So I did it. I did the course. I did really well. They basically taught you how to hold a microphone, and then that was all morning. And then in the afternoon, at lunch, you had to think of a story that you wouldn't tell your mum. And then in the afternoon, we all took it in turns telling it, and then we'd critique each other and tell people what we thought. And then at the end, they gave me the number for downstairs at the King's Head in Crouch End. And the guy that ran the course, Brian Luff, he said, you could go on stage tonight and do that. And I was like, oh. So this is in like March 2006. I was 25. My birthday's in October. So in my head, it was just like Steven Spielberg directed Jaws when he was 25. And I wanted to do something that I was proud of by the time before I was 26. Right. So I enlisted. I did the course, booked a gig, phoned up downstairs at the King's Head, which was very scary. Booked a gig for September, which was just before my 26th birthday. And then that was like months away. So in between them and then and there, I did this play that I'd been putting off for years, called Stroke. And I I did that in Edinburgh. I'd taken 9 years to write it. It got a 1-star review in the Scotsman, which was a printing error, and apparently it should have been a 2-star review. But by that point, it was too late. And the day after it was 1 star in the paper and it was 2 stars online. And the day after the 1-star review came out, we were struggling, we were really struggling. We were trying to get people to come and see the show. It was an empty theatre. It was at the Bedlam Theatre. Rob, who I was doing the Edinburgh shows with, I've done everything with him. Like I think we did the last school play, my first 2 shows. We'd done everything together. And Rob was at university in Edinburgh, which meant that he had accommodation during the holidays, which meant we didn't have to pay for accommodation, right? So we were saving money, and we did it at the student theatre, and we were flyering every day, and no one was coming to see the show. We got a 1-star review. We sold out, and people, and there was music involved in that show, and people would come out. And I remember we came out on stage, and people were laughing at us, like this show's shit, it got 1 star. And then by the end of it, we got a standing ovation, and it was kind of like, good, right. I knew it wasn't totally shit, but at the same time, I've spent 9 years writing this play for a 1-star review, and that was August. And then September came along, and I had this gig at the downstairs King's Head, and I was writing material on the bus. And when I got on stage and I started doing my set, which was 7 minutes, I think. I was making up stuff on the spot and saying it, and some of it would get a laugh and some of it wouldn't get a laugh. But I was like, I've just spent 9 years writing a play to find out that it was shit. I can say something right. I can say something right now. You get immediate feedback. Yeah. And it was like, oh, great. Plus, I didn't have to organize an audience. There was an audience that was there, which was, again, this is great. And then it's just like, if you can stand up in front of 1,000 posh boys at a boys' school and tell them to stop speeding their cars, and for them to sort of like tell you under their breath that you're a loser and that you're shit, if you can do that, then you can do a room underneath a pub in front of 30 people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like, oh, so it's like all of my experience. Yeah, all of my experience that had led up to that was just sort of like, oh, I've been really trying and failing with all this other stuff. And I was lost. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And when I did that first gig, it was like, at the end of the gig, the people that had run the course were there, and they were like, what's this? Like, is this like your 3rd or your 4th gig? And I was like, no, it's my first. Bloody hell, they think it's my 3rd gig, and it's not, it's my first. And like, now you realize that it's like a tear in a bucket, but at the time it's like, wow. And then someone else who ran another club came over to me, and they said, do you want to do a gig in like 1 month's time? And I'm like, yeah. And I'd never been offered another gig through theatre. And with stand up, I'd done 1 gig, and I'd instantly doubled the amount of gigs I'd got.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, fuck, I'll do this then. And then that was that. I just did stand up.
That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. It's funny how throughout your career, everything's to do with confidence, really, isn't it? So you had a couple of good experiences that kind of boosted you up, and then obviously you had a couple of bad experiences that put you the other way. But it's so quickly how it changes again.
I think, it's that, and it's also purpose. If you know what you want to do and you're doing it, then it gives you drive and it gives you direction. But if you I mean, at the age of 23, 24, to have my own theatre company that I had built up myself, and to be touring it across the southeast, and to be hiring actors and directing actors, and like filling in forms and planning, but planning routes that we were going to. This is before like smartphones, so you'd have to have a fucking atlas and plan the routes that you were going to the school and stuff. And I was doing all of that stuff, and 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 it was what I'd studied at university to kind of do. And it's kind of like, well, surely you were incredibly proud and confident, and that you were achieving so much at such a young age. And I was just ashamed, and I just didn't want to be doing it, and I was really disappointed in myself. And I think that's because it wasn't what I wanted to do deep down in my heart. I sort of like I'd sort of convinced myself without trying that I couldn't make it. So right. I went for the plan B, which was something related to what I wanted to do, which was writing and acting and performing, but it wasn't quite what I wanted to do, because it was education, it was theatre and education. It was kind of like I felt, and there's nothing wrong with that either. It's just not what I wanted to do, and it didn't feel right when I was doing it. And I guess I probably wasn't very good at it either, because my heart wasn't in it. And when I started doing stand-up, it was just like, oh, this is it. Oh. And then through stand-up, I started doing stand-up, and then I still worked in the pub until I got so many gigs in the evening that I couldn't work evenings anymore. So I had to get a day job instead. But through doing stand-up, I began to start making eye contact with people, and I could talk to strangers. There'd be this thing. I'd be living at my parents' house, and they'd have people over, and they'd sort of like, come down and say hello, Nick. And I'd be like, I don't want to talk to people about my life and what I'm up to. People say, what are you up to? And I had no news. I'm not doing anything. You're trying to convince your parents' friends that you're not an absolute fuck up, and you are. And then all of a sudden, doing stand-up gave me this confidence to meet strangers, talk to strangers in the pub, like, while I was working in the pub, or if I was going out in the evening, I could talk to anyone, and I could make eye contact with people, and and then I noticed this change in me where it's like, oh, I feel, not obnoxiously confident, but I feel like I can stand up straight, and I can kind of, I can sort of like, go toe to toe with anyone. It's like, what do you do? What do I do? And I knew what I wanted to do then, and I had something to aim for.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
I did. Go on.
It's definitely a thing, because like on a lower level, obviously I'm not a stand-up comedian, but I'm genuinely no such a confident person, but I use humour to build my confidence up and to kind of get myself through situations. And I think it's definitely, laughter is, like you say, medicine in it. And I think it does help people's confidence. It's certainly helped me throughout my career.
It builds confidence in yourself, and if you're funny and you make people laugh, then it's kind of like it makes you feel good, because you can do something, and you're good at doing something. But on top of that, it is like you're providing a service for people as well. And that gives you like a sense of pride and achievement, because people are coming to see you, or you're on, and the dream really is that people leave in a better place than they entered. So if you can do that, if your job is to basically, even if it's for a brief moment, if you can go in and you can make people feel better about whatever it is they're feeling, then even if it's like forgetting how shit their day was, or that they've got a job that they hate, or whatever, if you can kind of like go in and like and provide a service, and sort of like, I think that's a really good, that's a positive thing. You're kind of giving something back a bit, and I think it's taken me a while to get there, but definitely kind of what I get the most satisfaction out of now is kind of giving back to people, and if there's ever sort of like young comedians that need advice, I'm always kind of like there to help people out, and that's like a part of what I enjoy about the job. It's not, I get very nervous getting up on stage, and I have like highs and lows with mental health. But in terms of like the job, I like being on stage. I don't like getting on stage. I don't like the build up towards getting on stage. I don't like the day waiting for the gig in the evening.
The exact same way that this podcast, see, like the hour leading up to interviewing somebody is like, I'm like, oh, it's the last thing I want to do. And this is the first, other than yesterday, was the first one that I did. So because I've been off this week, I was like I'm just booking her as a podcast just so that I get into it. But like last night, doing my first one, I was so scared to come on and talk. And once you're on, it's fine. It's just the initial jump in.
But I also think it's very difficult meeting people on Zoom, and because I do a radio show, and we have we interview. I do a radio show on Fan Club on Food Bar Radio with my friend Nathaniel. And the first hour, it's a 2-hour show, and the first hour is just me and Nathaniel chatting. Second hour, we have a guest on. And when they were in the studio before the pandemic, I was always all right meeting people, but on Zoom, I get very nervous. I think that it's easy to sort of like misunderstand each other on Zoom. And I find it quite stressful. And so you end up being like in your own house or your flat, being all stressed about the fact that you got to meet someone, and it's like it's not the best circumstances. But I totally get that. I get nervous before all my interviews. Really, it's just I get nervous about doing most things. I think sometimes it's like with me, I think it's the nerves that make me unique. It's like it's the style of comedy that I do, the way I am on stage, what I choose to write about. It's all comes from the point of view that I'm like, I have to be dragged onto the stage to do it. And then when I'm there, I'm absolutely fine, and I revel in it and I enjoy it. But getting me there is the hard part, really.
Right. So just kind of, obviously we've touched on a lot of your stuff at the Fringe, and I mean you played there basically every year, but just jumping forward a wee bit to kind of taking your stuff onto the telly, because I think like the first time I seen you would have been on 8 out of 10 Cats. So how was that sort of thing, like doing your stuff in front of other comedians? How did you kind of deal with that?
Well, what I loved most about when I started doing comedy was when I moved to London, or when I moved to St Albans from London. I was all alone, and I was lost, and I didn't know what I wanted to do until I started doing drama in year 10, year 11 at secondary school. And it was like this decade process from like 1989 to 1999, where I didn't have any friends, and then I made friends, and then I started doing something creative, and then I made all of these friends, and then that took me all the way through university. And then it's almost like the process started again, where when I finished university in 2002, I went right back down to rock bottom again, and I didn't have any friends. I was living back at home. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then by the time it got to like 2006, it was like I started doing stand-up, and then in doing stand-up you're hanging around with other people, and they're all people that have the same interests as you all want to do stand-up, and you're all interested in stand-up, and you make friends, and you start running gigs, and everyone's doing your gigs and you're doing everyone else's gigs. And it was like well, what I loved about it was the first time since university that I felt like I was learning something, and I was making friends, and it mirrored the exact same process of going through school. And so by the time, so I did Keep Hold of the Gold in 2010, which was basically, I had given up by that point. I'd done Edinburgh so many years. I think I did 2008, I did about 4 shows. I did I Think You Stink, Helm and Taylor, which was a double act I was in. I compared for Hannah George and Katie Wilkins of Drunk Women Solving Crime fame. And I did something else. And so 2007 I did stand up. 2008 I did a bunch of shows. 2009 I did my own show at the Free Fringe when 2 comedians dropped out and I had to fill an hour. And that was kind of like, I've done about as much with Edinburgh as I want. I'll do one more year in Edinburgh, 2010, because I can do the Tron. And then I did the Tron with Rob, and he played guitar, and and it changed my life. It was like I'd have one more stab at it for fun, and then that's it. I'll work out what else to do after that, or I'll take a break from Edinburgh. At least I won't take a break from stand up, but I'll take a break from Edinburgh because I've done it for 10 years now, and over 10 years. And and then that was the show that Daniel Kitson came to see, that Jimmy Carr came to see, that Cunt and the gang came to see. I got loads of great reviews. I'd had friends from school and teachers and stuff that had come to see me up in Edinburgh that said, stop doing this. You're going nowhere. And then you realise, I'm not going to be. I love doing this. I don't know what standard you're judging it on, but I don't need to be famous. I don't need to make money. Don't need anything. I will work in a pub and work in an office all year round just to do Edinburgh. And this isn't about you giving me permission to do it. It's about me wanting to do it. I love this. This is what I love. This is what gets me out of bed every day. This is, coming up with ideas, writing them, and then doing them. So you do have people that come up to you and tell you, you're wasting your time, and then you just cut them out of your life, I suppose.
Yeah.
And you just need to stay focused on what you want. Or you realize that they're not your friends, because they're judging you based on the fact that they're embarrassed for you. And you're like, well, I don't need you to be embarrassed for me. But so 2010, so this year really took off, and all of the industry. I had a good year in 2009. But 2010 was the year that everything really took off. All the industry came to see me. I just got an agent. And they asked me to do Russell Howard's Good News. Or I think off the back of that Edinburgh, they kind of put me in the mix to do Russell Howard's Good News. So I mean, you're asking what's it like performing in front of other comedians and stuff like that, but it's sort of like you're so used to it by that point. In actual fact, I preferred performing in front of comedians to actual audience members, because I was such a divisive act that I'd split the rooms, and some people would hate me, some people would love me. I could have a good gig and a bad gig in the same gig. And I always loved the comedians' reactions.
Well, this is my point, because that's one of the things I enjoy, about 8 out of 10 cats, is watching the other comedians laugh at the comedian that's telling the jokes at that point, and I think it's really refreshing to see, obviously, the admiration that you all hold each other in.
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, I mean, 8 out of 10 Cats is a tough show, but I think it's also, in terms of those panels, I think things have changed quite a lot very recently. But for a long time, panel shows have been a bit of like a bun fight where it's whoever can shout the loudest and whoever can kind of talk, and it's you've got to be really pushy to do those sorts of shows. And 8 out of 10 Cats had the reputation for being one of the nicer shows, and it's also a really good show for newer acts. And one of the reasons Jimmy Carr came to see me in 2010 was because he was told, he went up to Edinburgh and he heard that my show was one of the must-see shows that year, and he came to see it. I think Jimmy Carr is great when it comes to that sort of thing. He's really good at finding new talent. He's really good at kind of like going to, not just like, I've heard that this act is good, and not doing the homework or the groundwork.
Yeah.
He'll go up to Edinburgh, he'll grow a beard, he'll wear a baseball cap, and he'll go around, incognito, and he'll watch all of these acts. And then when it comes down to 8 out of 10 Cats, he's got a say in it. Do you know what I mean? I don't know how much he does now, so I did Russell Howard's Good News, which I was the wild card. I think, like, let's say they had 10 shows, I was the 11th act, and if one of the other acts didn't work out, then they'd use me. Right. But I was not a guaranteed, because everyone thought I was gonna punch someone on TV, and people didn't know that it was an act. People thought I was crazy, and people thought I'd just swear uncontrollably, and I would just do, it's like, I've written this is like a thing. So one of the other acts didn't work out, and they ended up using me on Russell, and then it changed my career. It changed me from being an opening act or a middle spot to being a headliner. And then 8 out of 10 Cats, you have to audition for 8 out of 10 Cats, and I went in and auditioned for 8 out of 10 Cats. And I remember, it was so many years ago, but I remember Catherine Ryan was on my panel. You do it in kind of like the production company. You go to the production company, you sit in their kind of like their staff room. Everyone comes in their lunch break, and they watch you do like a mock-up trial of an 8 out of 10 Cats episode.
Right.
And I was shit. Catherine was incredible. She kind of like knew exactly what she was doing. I can't remember who else was on my thing. It was a very long time ago. But I remember I had a tough audition. Like I didn't do so well. And so they were like, well, he can't do it because he's not good enough or whatever. And Jimmy Carr was the one that said, no, he is good enough. I've been to see him in Edinburgh. You've got to book him for the show. And that's that.
Right.
And they booked me for the show. And it's the sort of thing that you do get better at. But in terms of my experience of doing panel shows, I don't do any other panel shows. I haven't done any other panel shows. I don't want to do, a lot of the other panel shows, I'm not going to name any because I might want to do them at some point in the future, but a lot of them have very bad reputations in terms of, people trampling over each other and people talking over each other and it being incredibly competitive. And I'm in a competitive industry. You've got to be a bit competitive. It's the part of the industry that I hate the most. I hate the competitiveness. And I guess what I've tried to do with my career is not be like anyone else. I've not, I think if you're in direct competition with someone else, it's because your act is too similar, Yeah. And I think it's kind of like what I've tried to do is just kind of like go, I do something that is so different from what everyone else does that I don't feel like I'm in competition. And 8 out of 10 Cats had a reputation for being kind of like one of the nicer ones for newer acts. And Jimmy Carr insisted that I did it, and I did it. And again, he's helped out loads of younger new comedians like that. And he went to see me every year for like a stretch. And I still do 8 out of 10 cats now, because at one point 14 years ago, Jimmy Carr, or 13 or 12 years ago, Jimmy Carr said he should be on the show.
Yeah, and you do kind of your role on kind of like obviously the countdown, and the dictionary corner. That role kind of suits your comedy down to the ground, doesn't it? And something like that with the dictionary corner, then that you've got your bit. So that's, again, you've not got somebody talking over you. You know that you're going to get your time.
Well, and this is sort of like, and in terms of panel shows, it's sort of perfect. It's perfect, but it's also very stressful. So I just remember when we did like regular 8 out of 10 cats, you get like a press pack, and you have to read through it and then write jokes on stuff, and then you'll get questions, and then you'll do one of the jokes that you've written. And I would write something like 3 jokes. And I don't know if you can get them, but if you ever see like a very old, just normal 8 out of 10 cats that I'm on, I don't really interact. I sit at the end of the panel, I don't talk, and then Jimmy will say, "And how about you, Nick? Have you got anything?" And he'll bring you in. Do you know, if you don't contribute, or like if you're quiet, because I wanted to like just bust, push in. So Jimmy will kind of like, he'll see you waiting and he'll go, "Nick, have you got anything to say?" And then that is that point where I tell my joke. And I would have 3 jokes written for each question. And if the first joke didn't work, I'd do the second joke. And if the second joke didn't work, I'd do the third joke. But I would end up saying sort of like 6 things per episode, but they'd use them all because they, I had 6 jokes and he used all 6 of my jokes. And some people would talk for ages, but they wouldn't use any of them. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, it was quality over quantity. And I tried to sort of like, and I was also very nervous and shy and timid, and Jimmy would bring me in. So when it came to Dictionary Corner, it's kind of like, oh, it's great. And it was, I got to work with Susie Dent, and it's sort of like this self-contained sort of thing, which is great, where they just come over to you. But the negative side of that is you're out there for the entire show, and you're sat there, and let's say I've written a song specifically for it, and I'm sat there, and they, TV takes ages to film. So for like a 45-minute 8 out of 10 cats does countdown, you're filming for 2.5 hours, right? And so the first bit, when they're just chatting to each other and everyone's getting their mascots out, that goes on for an hour sometimes. And you haven't said anything, and you're sat there for an hour just like waiting for everyone to introduce themselves. And then Jimmy Carr will come over to you and he'll say, "And you, Nick, what have you got for us this week?" And off of nothing, the audience are there, and you haven't done anything, and you haven't said anything because you haven't interacted with any of the, and out of that, you got to stand up and do a fucking song or a poem. And it's just like, you go, oh my God, like it would be bad enough if you were waiting in your dressing room and then you had to come out, but you're sat there in front of everyone in silence for an hour. And then you have to, do this fucking show-stopping bit of material that you've just written and it's brand new and you haven't tried it out yet. And then you have to go back in your little place again and then come out again. So it's on one half, it's a really great showcase for you to kind of like do what you want with it. And on the other half, it's absolutely fucking terrifying because you just want to just like go, hi guys, how you doing? I'm here too. Don't worry, it's all right. But so I'm really proud of what I managed to do with 8 out of 10 cats, because it looks like, oh, this is a lot of fun. It's a really hard slot, and I've done it. I don't know, 8 times now, 7, 6, 7, 8 times. It's more than 6, I think. So maybe, and I've had good ones and I've had hard ones, and they always look great on TV.
Yeah.
But sometimes it takes a while to get to it, and so yeah, it's really nerve-wracking. So it's not an easy slot. So sometimes it's kind of it's difficult. So
definitely, always when you're on, you and Joe Wilkinson, those ones are the most memorable ones. Those are the ones that I always go back and look at.
I think it's because I
just felt different.
Like Joe is incredible.
I think these are both different styles of comedy. I think these are both different styles of comedy from the more kind of people that sit on the panel.
Yeah, and also I think I write stuff specifically for it, and I think that you could get away with reading like an extract from your book that you're promoting, or and so. But when I first started, I always felt like Susie gets overlooked quite a lot in terms of the show, and I felt like it was like a gap in the market where it's like, why don't people use Susie more? Because you're in Dictionary Corner, and it's kind of like a lot of the times the comedian, whoever's in Dictionary Corner, will do a sort of monologue, and sort of Susie will be sat next to him. And I was just like, well, why don't we include Susie in it? And then I thought I'd only do it 3 times. So I did like the first one was like, I'm in love with Susie. Second one is that she's broken my heart and she's dumped me. And then the third one is I'm trying to win her back or whatever. So I thought in terms of a 3-act structure, 3 episodes over 3 or 4 years, that would be enough. But then they kept hiring me. And so it expanded and expanded. And now it's just sort of like me and Susie have this sort of on again, off again relationship where I'll write, I really enjoy it. When they've booked me, I'll think, what shall I write for Susie this time? And I'll spend like, a week or 2 weeks putting together some songs and some poems and stuff. And I'll be thinking, I want it to be funny in the room, and I want Jimmy to laugh and John to laugh, and I want the audience to laugh, and then I want it to work as TV. But also, when I sit down after I've finished a song and it goes back to the game, Susie will whisper to me and she'll go, that was great. Or she'll go, well done. Or she'll go, I loved that song this week. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she gives you feedback. And so I'm writing for her as well. And I think what I did, and then what Susie's been great about, is that we've made it kind of like into this it's a running gag, but it's also this running storyline that means that, and it's the same thing that I tried to do when I started out doing stand-up. I was like, my 20-minute set, which was sort of like what I ended up doing on Russell Howard's Good News, it had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you could put me on at the beginning of the show, you could put me on in the middle of the show, you could put me on at the end of the show. But I was a self-contained show, right, which had a 20-minute structure to it, where by the end of it, the whole audience was singing along, and then they go to the interval or they go home or whatever. But there was other acts on, but for the purposes of when I was on, it was like it was a standalone bit. And I guess that's what I ended up doing with 8 out of 10 Cats, which is like when I'm on, that there's going to be a thing with Susie, and and it's fun, and it's out of respect, and I love her. I think she's brilliant.
So obviously 2014 you ended up with the sitcom Uncle.
Yes.
How did that come about, and how much of that is your writing? Because the thing about it is, see, watching that, I think of my growing up and my nephews, and I see a lot of myself in that programme. Don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I get that. I get that a lot. Like, a lot of people come up to me and they say that they see themselves on screen, and obviously it's something that I think it's really brilliant. It's like so I don't write Uncle. It was originally written by Oliver Refson, who directed it, and then it was and then his partner Lila Vanderberg, she started writing it with him in the second series, and then I write the songs, and it's kind of, I wrote the songs, so it's sort of collaborative, but at the same time they very much write it, and then you get feedback, but it's their thing. But the way it came about was that I was doing in 2011 I was doing my show Dare to Dream and it was the first time I got to the Pleasance. So my very, when I saw Al Murray in '97, I never thought I'd ever perform at the Pleasance.
Right.
And then in 2011 I'm performing at the Pleasance, and Henry Normal, who runs Baby Cow, or used to run Baby Cow. He ran Baby Cow at the time. Henry Normal is a poet who has been involved in some of the biggest British sitcoms throughout the 2000s, and was Steve Coogan's writing partner. And I was a huge Steve Coogan fan when I was growing up and getting into comedy. I think The Man Who Thinks He's It is one of the best live shows. I think it's the best live show that's ever been performed. I think it's incredible. And I had all the DVDs, and Henry Normal was on the extras in the DVDs, and he's sort of like a behind the scenes guy when it comes to Baby Cow. I came out on stage one day and he's on the front row, and I'm like, fucking hell, it's Henry Normal. And I'm like, at the time I was one of the few people, he's gone back to performing again, but at the time I was one of the few people that would come out. He was a TV executive. It's one of the few people that could sort of like go, that's Henry Normal. Oh, fucking hell. And then I got nominated that year, and I won Dave's Best Joke and all of that stuff. And basically Channel 4 said, oh, we're doing these blaps. Would you like to do some blaps? Which are like these 5-minute online video things. And I was like, yeah, of course. And they said, who do you want to work with? And I was like, oh, Baby Cow. And they were like, well, and Baby Cow weren't really working with Channel 4 that much. They were mainly BBC. And so I met up with Henry, and they said that they'd like to sort of like do it. I think I was pitching ideas with Josh Widdicombe and another comedian called Henry Packer.
Right.
And we were pitching ideas at Baby Cow as well. And so I sort of like had got to know them after 2011, and then the Blaps came along, and I got to work with them, and Henry kind of like guided me through what to do. I was going to write these sort of like 5-minute sketches, and one of them was about a guy talking to a kid on a bench and giving him bad advice.
Right.
So one of them was literally, it was about me, my stage persona, being like a fuck up, talking to this kid, giving him terrible advice. And then Henry said, what you should do is take some stuff that you've already done, like take a couple of songs and a poem and film those, because this is your moment to get paid for something that you've not got paid for yet. Because I'd written all of these songs and I'd never been paid for it because I was trying to get my name known. And he said, this is your first opportunity to get paid for some of the stuff that you said. Take your best songs, your best poems, and let's do them. And I was like, great. So I put everything else on the side, did them. Blaps worked out fine. The music videos still stand up, they're great. And then a couple of months later, they got this script in, and maybe I'm remembering it a little bit differently, maybe it's a year later or whatever, but the script came in for this pilot called Uncle. Henry read it, sent it to me, and I read it, and I was like, this is good. And he said, come in, we'll have a meeting. And I had a meeting where I met Oliver Refson, who wrote it, and we just chatted about it a bit. And Henry was sort of like, he had it all planned out in his head. He was just, it was about an out of work actor that hangs out with his nephew. And Henry said, if you change it to a musician, then Nick can write a song every week.
Yeah.
And Ollie was like, all right. And then he was like, how do you two feel about each other? Do you like Ollie? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, do you like Nick? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, great. Let's film it in September, you know? And it was like that. Let's film it in September. And it's just like, what? Or maybe it was November. He goes, right, let's film it in November. And I was like, oh, fuck. And I didn't audition or anything. Like, he'd been to see me and I'd worked with him, and he's just like, this is perfect for you. And I hadn't done loads of screen acting. I'd done some student films and stuff, but like not loads of stuff. And I hadn't acted for a few years because I wasn't writing theatre anymore. So I was like, oh, fuck, can I do it? And then we did the pilot. And because I'd done the Blaps with Channel 4, the pilot was with Channel 4. Channel 4 passed on it. They didn't. I think we filmed it in November, came out in December, and it was like, fuck, of 2013 maybe. And then Channel 4 passed on it, and Shane Allen, who was the head of Channel 4, moved over to BBC, and he took Uncle with him. He said, if Channel 4 aren't going to do anything with it, then we'll do it. And I think I've talked about this in an interview, and then Channel 4 came out and they said, just to be clear, we didn't lose Uncle to BBC. We didn't want it. So you go, okay, fine. So just to clarify, they didn't want it. It was thrown out. And so we went over to BBC and we had to refilm the first episode again. And Henry was just like, let's not do a pilot. Let's just ask to see if we can get a series. And so we did a series, and it was like that. It was like I thought, oh wow, TV's easy. And little did I know that it's fucking impossible to get anything made. And it was an absolute fluke that A, the pilot got made, and B, that we, after the pilot got like rejected, that it went over to BBC, and it got, you know, I owe Shane Allen like everything. I owe Jimmy Carr everything. I owe Henry Normal everything. Like there's these people in my life that I'm shy. I don't have that I've got like self-belief, but not real self-confidence. So I can write something and think, I think this might be good, but I don't think that I'm the best person in the room or anything like that. Yeah. And you have these people that literally, I did an audition for 8 out of 10 Cats. I struggled, and Jimmy Carr saw that there was something worthwhile in me to push. Henry Normal, if I'd have auditioned for Uncle, I wouldn't have got it, but he gave it to me, and it was like, and I did a good job. Do you know what I mean? And you know, there's some scenes in Uncle where I go, oh, I nailed that one, and that's, do you know what I mean? And it's kind of like it's like one of those things that I didn't know I could do it until I did it, and then when I did it, it's just like, oh right, this is something I can do. And then with Shane Allen as well, it's like he took that show and he put it on BBC, and it got a thing. The fact that it's about a fractured family. You know, there's a lot of talk about diversity at the moment, which is a good thing. But I think, you know, Uncle was always sort of like leaning towards that stuff. You know, Lila, one of the writers, I think she's from Los Angeles, and Ollie is New York, and they're very sort of like, you know, they've got their finger on the pulse, and Lila is all up to date with all of like youth culture and online culture and everything like that. And so they've always kind of like written about stuff, contemporary stuff. And so in Uncle, you've got kind of like this family that's made up of all of these people that that have found each other. Also, it's my character was although it was played to, and I think maybe if we'd have done it again, the first episode, I think that my character, it starts off with a suicide attempt, and I think that the suicide attempt should have perhaps been played a little bit more straight, because he's got like this contraption where he's got this radio on a pulley and he's going to cut it, like it's like a Wile E. Coyote contraption, and I just think that should have been a little bit straighter. But the way that I've always dealt with depression, and I didn't have that opportunity to be choosy about what I did. So I was very lucky that when Uncle came in, it was something that was absolutely in my wheelhouse, something that I believed in. It was about a guy, if you look at it from my character's point of view, it was about a guy that had tried to kill himself and was dealing with depression and having fucked up his life. And he was creative. He was a musician that didn't know what his future was. And it's all of these things that I could absolutely relate to. So I was very lucky that it became such a personal thing, to the point where everyone just assumes that it was my thing. But it was literally, it's a perfect storm of me meeting this writer and working with Henry and this script coming in, and it being so similar to this script that I nearly wrote for these Blaps. And for it to be kind of like, well, this is great. When it came in, it was just like, well, I don't have to write this at all. And, we all were so close. I'm still in contact with Elliot, the kid, who's a grown up now, who's doing stand-up gigs, and he asked me for like advice and stuff. And I'm still in contact with Ollie and Lila. I'm still in contact with Henry, and
so that's kind of like, I've kind of then it's went full circle to you are kind of like an uncle to that boy. And you know what I mean? That's mental.
I loved that kid. And it was really difficult for him because he was 11 when we did the pilot. And he was 12 when we did the when we did the series. And I'd watched him grow up over about 4 or 5 years. And it wasn't, I think when you're an adult, and I've done, not loads and loads, but I've done quite a lot of TV. And you make connections with people, and then you go on to your next job, and then you lose contact with them, you see someone every day for months and months, and then you don't see them for years. You haven't fallen out. It's just the way it happens. And you move on to the next job. But with the kid, he was 11, and it took up between the age of 11 and 16 filming that, which is a big part of your youth,
formative years,
and it's kind of like, and then when we finish filming, you're all meant to just move on and drop each other and move on to the next job. And he didn't have a next job to go to. He had school, so I felt like responsible for him. So we've always kept in contact, and I always made sure that he was eating all right, and I'd take him out for food and the cinema, and and I love him, and he's in his early 20s now, which is absolutely crazy to think about. And he's just the most talented person that I know. He's kind of, he could pick up any instrument, and he could learn how to play it by the end of lunch. And he was making films when, little short films when I first met him. He can act, he can write. He started doing stand-up. He's like incredible, and
I'll definitely go and check him out more. Look for some more of his stuff. Off the back of Uncle, is that how you get the Heavy Entertainment? Is that how you kind of get that gig?
I think Heavy Entertainment came from the nomination in 2000 and. Was it 2011? I got nominated twice. Got 2011, 2013. And so Heavy Entertainment came about because I think it came about around about the same time as Uncle. So Christmas 2012, BBC Radio 1 were going to do a comedy slot, and they hadn't done a comedy slot since Chris Morris.
Right.
And they said, Nick, will you do an hour-long comedy slot to be broadcast on Boxing Day on BBC Radio 1? We haven't done any comedy since Chris Morris. And I was like, fuck. So I wrote an hour of radio called Nick Helm's Christmas Spectacular. And it was sort of like, had guests, and it had songs and music, and we recorded it at the BBC Radio Theatre, which is one of the most amazing theatres to do any recording in. And recorded this hour, and it came out really good. It came out on Boxing Day in 2012, and then 2013 came along, and they brought me in, and they said, will you do a pilot for Heavy Entertainment? Will you do a pilot for us? And I was like, I don't really want to. I sort of, what had I done? I'd just done Live at the Electric, and we were a band, and we were on last, and so they'd film the entire show, started at 7, and then we'd go on about 10:30 and play some songs. And as soon as the band started, the entire audience would always get up and leave, right? So if you ever see any footage from the first series of Live at the Electric when I was on it, you can see my dreams dying, because we were on TV, but the whole audience is just like literally filing out. And they said, do you want to do like a half-hour pilot for your own TV series? And I was naive, and I was like, I don't feel like I'm ready yet. I'll do it the next time you ask me, right? And I didn't realize that there probably wouldn't be another time. I was like, this is my life now. And they were like, we want something that's like the radio show, but for TV. And I was just like, look, I've had a really bad experience doing live stuff with Live at the Electric. I got a lot of abuse online. And I don't really want to put I think I'd got into my head that my stand-up only works in the room, only works as a live gig, and it doesn't work on TV. And they said, look, here's the deal. It's the end of a tax year. We've got this money to spend. You've got 4 weeks to do anything you want with it. So why don't you just go away and do it? And then, we'll see what happens. And okay. So I think this is the big. So I think the Christmas Spectacular was Christmas 2011. And so then we're at the beginning of 2012 here, right? Is that right? I can't remember my times. It's either 2012 or 2013. That's 2013. So before the end of the tax year, I went from, and I think some comedians plan what they're going to do for their live, if they ever got their own TV show for their whole life, And for me, it was literally, you've got 3 weeks to plan it. So I picked this title, Heavy Entertainment. I wrote the pilot, we filmed it, we edited it. It was very different from the series, but I thought the pilot was good. It's all glitzy, but it was kind of, I had a breakdown, and we did it, and I thought it came out really well. And then they said, do you want a series? We'd like you to have a series, because then we'll have Uncle, and then as a companion piece, you'll have Heavy Entertainment. So we filmed the first series of Uncle. Then I wrote Heavy Entertainment. And at that point, it was just like, well, what do I want to do with it? Now that I've got more than 3 weeks to work out what to do with it, what do I want to do with it? And I realized that as much as I liked the pilot was really silly, and it reminded me of something like Shooting Stars. It was like very much like a Vic and Bob, like Harry Hill inspired kind of half hour of silliness. But I was just like, I can't have a breakdown every week. And so it worked all right as a pilot, but as a series, I was just like, the series has got to be different from that. And I wanted to make it feel like it was like a low ceiling in Edinburgh, which was hot and sweaty, with the audience that were really packed in. I didn't want it to look like a lot of other TV comedy shows, and I wanted it to be very sort of personal and unique. And so so I didn't do Edinburgh in 2014. Oh, that's not true. I did 2 nights stand at the Grand.
Right.
So we filmed Heavy Entertainment in the hot summer. We edited Heavy Entertainment during the summer holidays. I went up and did 2 nights in Edinburgh one weekend, and then I came back down again and continued editing it. It was Heavy Entertainment is something I'm so incredibly proud of. The actual gigs in the room were incredible. They were some of the best gigs I've ever done. Really intense, and a lot of that's the ceiling and the art direction, and the fact that there was sweat dripping off of me, and the executives were like, "You've got to mop up all the sweat and get rid of. He's sweating too much." And I was just like, "No, the sweat is my act. You've got to be able to see how much I'm sweating, And so there was like loads of disagreements about all of that sort of stuff. And then and it was a new format for a new show. I did a short film called Elephant, which basically uses a lot of jump cuts. You spend an afternoon with these 2 people, but it's a 10-minute film, but you feel like you've spent an afternoon with them, right? And it jump cuts all the way through it. And Heavy Entertainment was a 2.5-hour record, a 2-hour record. And the idea was that we would jump cut our way through an evening. Yeah. So you'd get a song here, a joke here, a routine here. And then what happened was, in the edit, we were given a week to edit each episode. We were given six weeks to edit an entire series, which is like, you want a minimum of 2 weeks to edit it took a week to edit a 10-minute film. So to come up with a new format, to take a 2-hour live performance and edit it down to half an hour, make it make sense and make it coherent. So we ended up making it like trying to make it like linear, so that it flowed from beginning to end. So it felt like a 2-hour record was actually a half-hour record, and we didn't have the benefit and the luxury of experimenting in the edit with how to present this series. So it was filmed to be one way, and it ended up being edited in a more traditional way. And I think that I think it was sort of compromised by the end of it. But I would say that there are 3 episodes of Heavy Entertainment that I think are outstanding and I'm very proud of. And there's 3 episodes that I think we filmed 2 episodes a week. We had a 3-week record, so we had 2 episodes a week.
Right.
And so it was the equivalent of doing like 2 Edinburgh shows a week, like 2 completely unique, brand new Edinburgh shows every week, with new material, new songs, new set, new costumes. Everything was new bits, new audience participation. There was something new every week, and we were doing 2 a week. We'd record on the Tuesday and on the Friday. So we'd record Tuesday, and then we'd have Wednesday, Thursday to get the next episode ready, and then we'd record Friday. And it was an absolute fucking clusterfuck. And there's 3 episodes in that I think are absolutely astonishingly amazing. I'm so proud of them. I can't believe that I'm associated with it. It's just, it was its own thing. Stuart Lee's Comedy Vehicle was out at the time, and it was like, that's how you do live comedy. And it's like we had to reinvent the wheel, because it was just like, well, we don't want to be like Stuart Lee's Comedy Vehicle, which is the best stand-up show on TV, but we don't want to be like Live at the Apollo, which is sort of glitzy and mainstream. So we had to work out another way of doing something. And I think that nothing looked like Heavy Entertainment. Nothing felt like it. It was totally authored, and it was my pet project, which it took me some convincing to do it, because I was just scared of online criticism and it getting mangled by people that didn't really get my act. And And there was a bit of that, but I mean, I really had to stick to my guns, and I didn't make a lot of friends, I suppose. But I've just stuck to my guns about what I wanted the show to be.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If you're passionate about it, it needs to be the way you want it. I can mind seeing like one episode. It must have been maybe, I don't know, episode 4 or 5. That was the first time I came to it.
Yeah.
And I must have watched the following week. And it was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years later that I found the DVD. I thought, I'm going to buy that DVD. So I've been watching it. I've watched the DVD maybe 3 times in the last year. And I absolutely love it. Yeah. Because I could remember initially watching it, and I thought the setup of it, I thought I need to find that and watch it through. I love
it. I think I could probably count the amount of people that watched Heavy Entertainment on, if I took my shoes off, on my hands and my feet. Like nobody ever. And I'm so proud of Uncle. And people come up to, and people mention Uncle every day, and I think Heavy Entertainment was never repeated. It wasn't really advertised at the time. It kind of like it got buried in a way, and we put so much into it. Like everyone involved in that project put so much into it. It was the same art department from Uncle that I took over to Heavy Entertainment, and I just think there was nothing. I don't think there's been anything like it since either. I think it was so unique and special, and I go on about it all the time. I'm always like, Heavy Entertainment, you should watch Heavy Entertainment, and and I just think it's a shame because not enough people saw it. And I would have killed to do a second series because I think we learned so much with the first series that well, let's do a second series. I was ready to go. I planned out what all the episodes were going to be about and everything, and then it never came about. And this you just move on with your life. But I was very lucky to have that opportunity, and I've got that now. I've got it on DVD somewhere. And I think you can get it from iTunes as well, guys.
So your band, we were talking earlier about you were talking about your friend Rob played the guitar. That's no Rob that's in the band on Heavy Entertainment, is it?
No. So then Rob went his own way, and then I started working with David Trent on music, and then and then it made more sense to sort of like start working with other comedians that could play instruments at that point.
Right, because earlier on when you were talking about when kind of everything fucked up and you went back home to live with your parents and you were writing down all the jobs that you wanted to do, and you said about the astronaut and things like that. So that's one of the jokes on Heavy Entertainment with the boy with the guitar, David Trent. You ask him what he wants to do, and he wants to be an astronaut. And you're like, "Oh, you're fucked up, man!
You're far too old."
Yeah, so that's one of the jokes that sticks out. So see, when you said that earlier on, I was like, "That's like amazing to think that's probably about 10 years old before you've actually maybe used it."
I never thought about that either. But also going back to that, it's just kind of like, there are all these things on that list that I didn't think I could do, or I didn't, and I wanted something that was immediate, like stand-up comedy. But through stand-up comedy, I've had the opportunity to write music, be in a band, make a short film. I've acted in films. I've had my own sitcom. I've been in other people's sitcoms. I've presented my own food show. I've had my own stand-up show. Do you know what I mean? So like, when I went up to Edinburgh, by the time I did Russell Howard's Good News, I'd been doing Edinburgh for 14 years, and I had given up on all of my not dreams, but I'd given up on any kind of thought about the fact that I could make a career out of this, and I was literally just in it for the self-satisfaction of it, just sort of like, right, what am I going to write about this year? What am I going to do this year? And it was sort of like, and I was fine with that. I'd made my peace. I'd given up on kind of like pursuing kind of like any sort of acting career or anything like that. I was like, right, okay, this is. And so when everything came along, I'm very grateful for that, because it took me so long to get anywhere that I was very grateful for the opportunities that came along, you know. Whereas if it had come to me as soon as I finished university, you know, it's a bit like Uncle being that easy to get made. It was like, you just assumed that you take things for granted, and you just assume that that's how TV works.
Yeah.
And like, do you want to do a pilot for your own stand-up TV show? And I was like, no, I'll wait until next year or whatever. And they were like, Nick, what the fuck are you doing? Just do it. You know, this opportunity doesn't come out. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm the star of my own thing. Do you know what I mean? So it's sort of like, so to have waited that long for the good stuff to start coming along, I'm glad that I'm patient. I'm always, you know, that's like the best thing to sort of, you know, when people are starting out, you know, I had a 5-year plan where I'll do stand up for 5 years, and hopefully by the end of 5 years, I'll make enough money to pay my rent. And I managed to do it in like 3 years, I think.
Right.
But I had in my head 5 years, and just to be realistic about it, it doesn't happen overnight. But if you work really hard at something and you listen and you get good, you know, you accept the fact that you're not very good at something, and you open yourself up to the criticism, constructive criticism, and you allow yourself to improve, then you listen to the audience, you listen to, you know, other comedians, what they have to say, and then you listen to what you think, and, you know, you filter everything through what you think. So it's like, I don't agree with that person, I do agree with that person, what do I think? Then you can get places. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of but it just takes patience and persistence and hard work, and I'm going to say talent, but I think talent is something that you can also learn. You know, you can be a very talented guitar player, but that's because you put the hours into to do it. So I'm not like talking about a natural God-given gift.
Do you think that
desire? And if you want something, enough to sort of like make it happen, then and I haven't got to exactly where I want to get now, but I'm every day you kind of like try and sort of like push yourself in a direction. You try and achieve something every day. Towards getting something done. 2
hours in, I don't want to keep you too much longer, because it's a long slog for you. Obviously one of the hardest things I reckon you would have had to do in comedy would be get a Tory Baroness to sound funny. So how proud are you of that?
I mean, I found that it came across in the show as well, but I found that very conflicting because you know, it's not about it's not necessarily about politics. Well, it is about politics. It's so I did a show called Stand Up to Cancer. Stand Up and Deliver for Stand Up to Cancer, yeah. And there were a bunch of comedians that had to teach a bunch of celebrities how to do comedy. And that came about right before the pandemic hit. And then the pandemic hit the week we were meant to be filming. And then it went away, you know, so that program disappeared. And then at the end of the year, there was like, oh, the restrictions have been lifted a bit. And then it came back again. And they said, are you still interested? And I was like, yeah, I mean, I've been locked up for 8-10 months or however long it was. I'd do anything to leave the flat right now. It's for charity as well. Great. And it was good to be included with that group of people. And so there was like all these reasons why I did it. And then, you know, you get the list of celebrities, and one of them's a Tory baroness. And I was literally, there was a dancer, there was a singer, there was an actor, and there was a guy that used to be in the communards, who's now a priest, right? A vicar. And so it's like, right, well, I sing and I dance on stage sometimes, and I can act, and I'd be all right with any of the showbiz people. Politics isn't my strong point, and I'm not a Tory, and I haven't been brought up to be a Tory, and I have an issue with this, right? So I'll be all right with anyone, I think, as long as it's not the Tory. And then we get there, and it's like, you got the Tory, and I was like, fuck, because the issue with that is, like, and out of everyone has had stage experience. Like, the dancer's been on stage, the singer's been on stage, the reverend is in front of, like, I mean, I'm not religious. What do you call him?
Yeah.
All of his churchgoers, constituent, no, not his constituency, all of his churchgoers, yeah, all of his churchy people, they all turn up every week, and he's got to talk in front of them, right?
Parishioners, so, that's the word. Parishioners.
Yeah, them. Yeah, it's parishioners, right? And so everyone's on stage, so you can sort of. And then you got the Tory baroness who has to make all of these speeches, you know, Saeed Avasi, Baroness Saeed Avasi, and she's got to get up in front of make all these speeches. So everyone's used to public speaking, and I was just like, I'm very different from my stage persona. My stage persona is an act that I've worked out what to do, and it's very instinctive now. And I can slip in and out of it, and it's like, but I had to sort of like draw a line and separate myself from that, because the temptation to act like that all the time is kind of, you know, you need to have that, like, I'm off stage now, I'm not going to be a prick. But in terms of teaching someone else stand up, it's not about me saying, well, go up on stage, go up to that person in the front row, call them a cunt, shout in their face, and then fuck off afterwards. Do you know what I mean? It's not about teaching someone to do stand up the way I would do stand up, or the way I do stand up. Yeah. It's about working out. It's about working out who that person is, and who they are going to be on stage. And everyone's unique and different. And that's sort of a really fun process, because it's not like do what I tell you to do. It's about, you're going to work out who you are on stage, and I'm going to stand right next to you, and we're going to work it out together, and I'm going to try and push you through your limits, you know. And if you don't want to do something, I'm going to shout at you until you do it, because you'll feel better afterwards, and I know you will. And I know what it's like to go up on stage and to bottle it.
Yeah.
And I've never forgiven myself for moments where I've just sort of like lost my nerve. And I don't want that to happen to whoever I've got. And you've got a 5-minute gig, and I want to prepare you to get out there. Don't give a fuck about what anyone's thinking, and just go out there and do your act. You've got the Tory baroness, and it's just kind of like, right, so I don't want you to win, because it's a PR job. You know, everyone's going to go either, yes, she's the Tory baroness, or they're going to go, I don't like Tories, but she's all right.
Yeah.
You know, either way, the Tories have won. Do you know what I mean? You have helped do PR for the party and for that individual. And I had a real conflict with that. And then I just boiled it down to the fact that she was going to turn 50. And I didn't want to lose because I wanted everyone to know that I'm great at what I do.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to win because I didn't want everyone to sort of like turn into a Tory, and I didn't want to contribute to other people's suffering, you know. So then the way that you deal with it is, she goes, it's a 50-year-old woman, or she's about to turn 50, and on her bucket list of things to do is try stand up. And I go back to me being 25, and on my list of things to do was try stand up. And I know that when I was 25 and I tried stand up for the first time, it changed my entire life, and it put it on a new course. And everything that's good in my life now is because of that decision I made to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And she's going to be 50, and I absolutely can see it from her point of view that you don't want to get to your deathbed and think, I never tried it. People say stand up must be scary, and I say stand up is scary, but I think it's scarier to not do stand up for me.
Mm-hmm.
For me to get to the end of my life and look back and say I never tried it. I don't even know if I was good or bad or anything. I just never tried it. And I think that's sort of what's scarier, doing it or not doing it? Well, not doing it. So I do it, you know? And that's how I kind of like managed to break it. I stopped thinking about her as this baroness, this Tory baroness, and I started thinking about her as a real person. You know, she's a working class Muslim mother from up north, and she's about to turn 50 and she wants to try stand up. And then that's how we kind of like started to relate to each other, and that was what cracked it in my head for me. And then we got on really well, and she did a really great job, and I enjoyed teaching and sharing what I've learned over the last decade with someone else, and it paid off. And I thought, when you watch that show, everyone had a different technique, and I think that Saida would have done well if she'd have had any of the other comedians. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that, I don't know if she'd have won, and she would have done a different show. You know, she would have done a different act. But she was, on day one, she was very sort of like uptight and straight. Mm-hmm. But she was the best at talking in public, doing public speaking. And I think that any of the other comedians could have got a good performance out of her. But and I'd like to think that I could have done a good job with any of the other celebrities. Yeah. But I think we were a really good combination, because we did have that difficulty working with each other. That idealism in our, the ideology in our heads was different from each other's. And we had to get over some differences.
Yeah, it must be so hard to shift that kind of elephant in the room, really, isn't it? To get
yeah, and I told her as soon as we got put together, I said, look, you were the last person I wanted. You know, I wasn't horrible. I was just sort of like, but I'm gonna do a good job. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. We're gonna get through this together, and we're gonna do it. And we did, and it was great. And you know, I don't. It's a difficult one. I think I don't know about any of the repercussions, and I know that she's done very well, and we exchange text messages every so often, and kind of like we explored the idea of like working with each other again on other stuff. I think it's a really good combination. She's lovely. We get on really well. But at the same time, I am conflicted with all that stuff, and I don't know about the repercussions. But as a TV show, I thought it's some of the best TV I've ever been involved in. Yeah. Like in terms of not a sitcom, no, you know, but in terms of just like telly, what you watch in the evening. I thought I thought we nailed it, and I think that dynamic between us was really good.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I thought it was good.
Yeah. So obviously, I mean, we're really tight for time. Your last show there, Phoenix from the Flames, you ended up, you had to do it as a live stream, didn't you?
Yeah, well, we'd filmed it on one of the last dates in London. So I was halfway through the tour at the end of 2019. I did it in Edinburgh in 2019. It was my first full hour with bells and whistles and stuff, costumes and a set and all this other stuff. And it's the first time I've done anything like that in 6 years. And we're halfway through the tour, and then we filmed one of the last London dates, and then COVID happened, and we were never meant to show the video because I was going to rewrite the show in between the end of the first half and the beginning of the second half. I was going to tighten it all up and, put in some punchlines that weren't there and, finish it, make it all brilliant so that I could film it later. And then, I had this video that was for reference only, really. And we kept delaying the tour. It was like, oh, well, it's been delayed to it's meant to be March, and so it got delayed to September, then it got delayed to January, then it got delayed again, and then it got delayed something like four times. And then I was just like, do you know what, this show Phoenix from the Flames was about a really bad period in my life. It was about 2000 and it was about how I was feeling between 2016 to 2019. Like this 4-year period in my life when I was going through a breakup. I was going through a very difficult period of time. It's just like in terms of mental health, I was really sort of like rock bottom. And I wrote a show about it, and then COVID happened, and then I started thinking differently about stuff. I'm not better and not worse, but just felt differently about stuff. And I felt like the Phoenix from the Flames show was like a time capsule of how I was feeling in 2019. Right. And so when the tour got delayed to 2022, I was like, I don't want to do it in 2022. I wanted to do it in 2019 and 2020, but I would have written a new show in 2020 and I'd have done that. I don't want to still be doing the same show just because people have bought tickets for it. I don't want to still be doing the same show in 2022, 3 or 4 years after I'd started writing it. So I just said, like, let's cancel it. And when we're allowed back out, I'll write a new show. And luckily I had a recording. And so I cancelled the show, and everyone was like, oh, And I was like, you don't want to see it. You don't want to see me being forced to do a 4-year-old show. But we'll stream the recording that I did, and we'll do that. And we did that, and it was brilliant. And I watched the show. I watched the show with the audience because I'd obviously never seen it before because I was performing it. And it's the first time I've seen. It's like a 2-hour show, slightly shorter than this chat that we've had. And we watched it, and I was like, oh, it's really good. And then I was like, oh, I would like to do it again, actually, but we've cancelled it now. But yeah, I just thought it was good. There was another show that I did, which was like a rock concert that I did in 2016, 2017, called All Killer Some Filler. And we did that the first year of lockdown. And then the second year of lockdown, we did Phoenix from the Flames. And it was just a really good way to sort of like do some sort of event, an online event, with some shows that I'd recorded these shows, and I was like, they're not good enough to show to people. I was ashamed of them. And then it took someone else to watch them to say, Nick, they're actually good. Yeah. And then I was like, all right. And so we showed them, and then people liked them. And I'm my own worst critic. And
is there any prospect to like a DVD release or anything like that? Because I never get round to seeing it. What with lockdown and things like that, I didn't realise it was happening until after the event. So
Yeah, I think me and Chris at Go Faster Stripe, me and Chris were in talks about kind of like releasing it all. I think that you can do downloads, and when I get the tour together, I'll get some stuff printed up so that I've got some merchandise and I can sign stuff for people. And so there will be a DVD in at some point.
Yeah,
and I think you can.
Magic.
I think you can get digital downloads at the moment, but like, yeah, that's the aim. But I'm so sort of like, I'm so self-critical that I kind of like have a bunch of stuff that I'm not ready for people to see yet. And so with those things, it's just like, oh yeah, great. There'll be a DVD at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So just before we go then, obviously the podcast is called Time for Heroes. And what I do every week is ask.
We've got a little bit of time.
Yeah, ask the guests to pick 4 heroes to come in for dinner. So fire away with that. And obviously you need to tell me what you're cooking them for dinner as well. But you can do this as quickly as possible if you want. You can just fire through them. And we'll get a wee discussion at the end, and then that'll do us.
Okay, right. So who are my heroes? Well, who would we? Okay, so my heroes are Alice Cooper, Sylvester Stallone, Bruce Campbell, John Carpenter. Those are people that filmmakers and musicians and people that have sort of had a big influence on my life. My real life heroes are my mum and my dad. Harry Hill, Henry Normal. I think he's my friend, so it's a bit weird, but I would say I think Ramesh is one of my heroes. I think he's incredible. He's as close, I think, that we've got to 1990s peak Jack D.
Right.
Like he's like the next iteration of that. He's like, I love him. I think he's so brilliant, and he's worked so hard, but he's also very, kind. That's the same thing with Harry. Like what I said about Jimmy Carr in terms of how generous he is. I think Harry Hill is probably the kindest. He spent 10 minutes telling me about how much he loved heavy entertainment. And then he sort of, he wrote me a letter afterwards. I told him how much I loved his Channel 4 show. And then he wrote me a letter and he included a DVD of his Channel 4 show with it. And it was kind of like, I didn't give him my address, so he got it all through production and through agents and stuff like that. And he's been sort of like a mentor ever since. And so if I was cooking a dinner, maybe it'd be like a big thank you dinner to all of the people. I wouldn't be the person I am without Alice Cooper, because Alice Cooper is one thing on stage and another thing off stage. He's like a villain on stage. He doesn't care what people think about him on stage and when he's off stage, because it's all entertainment. And that's kind of what I do. So I guess I would cook for, but I'd really love to meet John Carpenter, who is sort of like a musical. So who would I have?
You can have them all, Nick. You can have them all. That's just what
I would have them all. I'd have them all. I know Ramesh would hold my hand and say, calm down. You're burning your paella. And then I would go and make sure I wasn't burning my paella. But I'd have them all.
You know that you're the first person on this show to pick their mum and dad. I don't think anybody's...
Oh, really?
Not one person's picked a family member, so you're the first one to do that, which is...
Oh,
I find
sickening.
It unbelievable. Yeah. So...
sickening of me. I've gone for the audience, the popular vote, haven't I? Just that they've helped me out for so long. I wouldn't be able to do what I did. Yeah, my dad wanted me to do IT, but my mum always believed in me, and my dad came around pretty quick. and they've just always been there for me, and they've always kind of like, and my dad wanted me to do IT as a backup. He wasn't sort of like, give up on your dreams. They've always encouraged me and my sister to sort of like follow what we wanted to do. I wouldn't be here without them. I wouldn't be the actor I am without Alice Cooper. I wouldn't have like the homemade approach to what I do without Bruce Campbell and Evil Dead. I wouldn't be here without the encouragement of Harry Hill. I wouldn't be here without friends like Ramesh. There's no women except for my mum, which I feel bad about. So I will say Julie Andrews as well, who is not only has she had a long and a huge career, and not only has she starred in both Mary Poppins, Sound of Music, and The Princess Diaries, but we share a birthday on the 1st of October, and I think Julie Andrews would be good as well.
Magic.
So those are my heroes.
Brilliant. And Nick, you've been a fantastic guest, honestly, and it's been brilliant to spend so long with you. It's been brilliant, mate. One thing that I would love you to do for me, if you could, see Ramesh, going to give him a wee text and tell him that this is the best podcast ever and ask him to come on it, because I've been hassling his agent for months.
I'll tell him to do that. If he ever replies to any of my messages, I'll tell him to, yes.
Yeah, and tell him I'm coming to Crawley next week.
Oh, yeah, right. I'll say, all right, I'll do that. Yeah. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much. I mean, I've literally just talked about myself for 2.5 hours. So good luck with the edit.
Thank you very much, man.
And thank you for having me.
No, it's been a pleasure, mate. I hope you all enjoyed this episode of Time for Heroes podcast. If you would like to get in touch, the best way is on the Facebook page, Time for Heroes podcast, or on Instagram at Time for Heroes podcast, or Twitter at Time for Heroes P1, or drop me an email at timeforheroespod@gmail.com. You'll find Time for Heroes on all podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple, Google and Amazon. Please leave a review where you can, share with others, and more importantly, enjoy.
A simple thing, a true unspoken, a life untouched, till we both choke. This will come if you stay.